Tell me a story. Tell me a story.
America's Black and White Book. Why We Are at War. 100 pictured by W. A. Rogers. America's Black and White Book. Introduction. Each government engaged in the European war has issued a white, green, blue or yellow book explaining the causes which led to its entry into the great conflict. These books are all interesting and are full of valuable documentary information. But if the busy people of America are to understand the reasons for their own participation in the war, some shorter cut to the desired end must be devised. We, therefore, offer a black and white book in which our nation's reasons for going to war are set forth in pictures, a universal language which can be read at a glance by anyone who has eyes to see. On August 1, 1914, we were at peace with all the world. We were bound by ties of blood to every race on earth. Particularly close and intimate were our relations with the German people, whom we welcomed to our shores as among our most desirable citizens. Then, far away from us, apart from our interests or concerns, like a tragedy being played on the other side of the footlights, broke the frightful War of 1914. We looked on fascinated, but not convinced of the reality of its cruelty. For a little over 8 months we watched it, when, on April 22, 1915, there appeared in the New York papers an advertisement stating that the great passenger ship Lusitania would sail on the 7th of May for Liverpool. In the next column, in equally conspicuous type, appeared a sinister warning to Americans, telling them to keep off the seas at peril of their lives. This was signed, Imperial German Embassy, Washington, D.C. On May 7th came the fulfillment of the threat, and we awoke to the fact that we were not an audience looking at a tragedy, but the victims of the tragedy itself. Not until then was it brought home to us that our good German friends, whom we thought we knew so well, had been inoculated with the virus of a Junker madness, and that we were dealing with a people who had cast from them every restraint of fair fighting and had become the outlaw nation of the world. In the following picture, carelessness on the part of the deceased. With Junker thoroughness, Dr. Bernhard Dernberg had been sent here to suggest excuses for the brutal assassination of Belgium, the first great German U-boat victory. The first woman to fall a victim to the U-boat piracy was a stewardess on an English merchant ship sunk without warning in 1914. Modern German Gothic art, the Reims Cathedral, belonged to the world. The product of hundreds of years of consecrated labor, its destruction by a nation devoted to culture is one of the primary reasons why we are at war. The announcement, the blackest count in the indictment against Germany, is foreshadowed in the warning by the Imperial German Embassy at Washington to all Americans of the crime which was to follow on May 7, 1915. A silent company, yet its voice is heard above the roar of cannon. On May 7, 1915, by order of the Imperial German government, the U-boat torpedoed the great ship Lusitania without warning, drowning over 1,200 passengers. A sea crime unequaled by any pirate known to history. Those cannon on the forward deck, immediately after the sinking of the Lusitania, hired perjurers swore that the ship carried guns on her forward deck when she sailed from the port of New York. Here are the facts. Germany, with brazen stupidity, insisted on being told the facts which she knew in far greater detail than did the government of the United States. He had expected to find the president alone. A few days after the crime of May 7th, the Count von Bernstorff requested an audience with the president. He understood he was to see the president alone. We Germans love the Belgians, who were forced into the war. Dr. Dernberg. The crushing of Belgium. If the Crown Prince Frederick Wilhelm really said what he is credited with, this is the most stupid, senseless, and unnecessary war of modern times, he accurately described his father's masterpiece. Invasion of Belgium by the uncultured. In the early months of the war, the plain people of the United States invaded Belgium. This lack of culture was not criticized by the Belgians. German religious art intended for a cathedral window. In the autumn of 1914, the German government issued a poster representing a 40 to c. and shell on which was piously inscribed, Mit Gott für König und Vaterland. A moving picture. Official Germany has reported that the busy U-boat commander sometimes desists from firing on lifeboats long enough to reel off a moving picture of his drowning victims. There is no American blood on John Bull's hands. A strong effort was being made in May 1915 to persuade the United States government that England was equally guilty with Germany in ignoring our rights at sea. Going to throw a scare into Uncle Sam. The German dearly loves a masquerade. Mr. Barthold was parading the German vote in Congress in January 1915 with the idea of throwing a scare into Uncle Sam. Those flippant Americans who were drowned on the Lusitania. Cologne Gazette. The semi-official Cologne Gazette added insult to injury when it characterized the 125 American men, women, and children lost on the Lusitania as those flippant Americans. Gott mit uns and Allah too. The Kaiser invited the unspeakable Turk to help subjugate the barbarians of England, France, and Italy. Swarming. The United States was swarming with German spies and assassins whose activities seemed to have a center in the German embassy at Washington. Here's a present from the Kaiser, my pretty little maid. Little children playing on the quiet greens of peaceful English villages seemed to be the favorite targets of the Zeppelin fleet, seized for military purposes. The hosts of culture seemed to take particular delight in the destruction of the monuments of Gothic grandeur in Belgium and France. Those who are decorated. As the war went on, the heroism and devotion of the Red Cross nurse seemed to shine out with a luster which quite eclipsed the glitter of military decorations. It was a glorious victory. Heroic Belgium, crushed beneath the gross bulk of bloated Junkerdom, still held his sword in hand, ready to strike again for freedom. One of those touching pictures of a German soldier feeding little Belgium. German soldiers whose hands were red with the blood of Belgian mothers, posed for official photographs to be used for American propaganda, showing them feeding little Belgian children. Don't you see the war is nearly over? Forget the Lusitania. After the campaigns of Lemberg and Przemysl, the Kaiser intimated to Washington that the war was about over. And it would be well, in the interests of peace, to forget the Lusitania. Activities of a German diplomatist in America. Count von Bernstorff continued to play horse with Uncle Sam, while Dumbo, von Papen, and Boyd looked on with ill-concealed contempt at the idiotic Yankees. Activities of an American diplomatist in Europe. In contrast to the violation of our hospitality by Counts von Bernstorff and Dumbo in America, Brand Whitlock, our ambassador in Belgium, spent his time in relieving the distress in that distracted country. A good deal like the goose step. Mr. Bryan, in the disguise of a pacifist, was consciously or unconsciously playing the role assigned him by the Imperial German Embassy at Washington. The sad case of Mr. Dumba, Ambassador Dumba, having accumulated sufficient rope, hanged himself at last. His hat as well as his passports were handed him by the president. Just whose pet snake is this? One bomb plot succeeded another, leaving a slimy trail that always led back to the German embassy at Washington. Once more the olive branch. In September 1915, the Count von Bernstorff extended the olive branch to the government of the United States, while von Tirpitz backed him up with a gun. Assurances by the wastebasketful. Von Bethmann Hollweg was urged by the German embassy in Washington to patch up any old assurances and send them over as Uncle Sam was becoming extremely restless. Yes, Father, I remember you said the war would end in October. Certain that Verdun would fall, the Kaiser had predicted that the war would end in October 1915. As September closed, the Crown Prince's army was being shot to pieces. Spraddled. It looked as though the German army was spread over too much territory, faced too many fronts to be effective. The Austrians did it. The Ancona was sunk with great loss of life, and the German government immediately claimed that an Austrian U-boat was responsible, their attitude being that any story was good enough for those idiotic Yankees. Recently on exhibition at Cooper Union, in the autumn of 1915, the Friends of Peace hung their white robes over plots of assassination, arson, piracy, and the destruction of ships and munition plants. The new intensive culture. Under our feet the Prussian spy system was working day and night. It was hard to take a step in Washington without sticking your foot on a spiked helmet. Watch your step. The people of the United States were beginning to think we had had enough of German aggression, and it was felt that a strong stand must be made for the national dignity and honor, whether to get angry or to laugh. In November 1915, Mr. Henry Ford had an idea wished on him by an Austrian lady who was lecturing in this country. She succeeded in making a spectacle of him, at which Uncle Sam was uncertain whether to laugh or weep. A message on preparedness at the psychological moment, when the country, in December 1915, was at the height of distraction, with plots against its peace and security being carried out in every direction. President Wilson came out with a message on preparedness for war, for ways that are dark. With one hand passing out checks to von Papen to pay for dynamite, and the other carrying assurances to the White House of Germany's good faith and friendship, Count von Bernstorff was fairly busy. It's got to be uprooted. Treasonable plots were becoming more and more unbearable. It was thought that the breaking point was very near. The Persia torpedoed. The U.S. consul to Aden, traveling on the business of his government, was the victim of a U-boat attack in the Mediterranean. This occurred very near the spot where we drove the Barbary pirates from the seas 110 years ago. The Barbary pirates, we cleaned them out 110 years ago, and we may have to do it again. The expedition in which the U.S. Marines distinguished themselves 110 years ago was brought to mind by the piracy of 1916. Yes, of course, Turkey did it. With characteristic effrontery, Germany and Austria disclaimed responsibility for the death of our consul to Aden, blaming it on the Turks. Washington's most industrious special correspondent. In February 1916, the newspaper offices were being bombarded with stories from a source near the German embassy. What Mr. Lansing thinks, Washington agrees with Berlin, what the president believes, etc., etc. A silent protest. In the Place d'Iéna in Paris stands a statue of Washington. Within sight of this monument, an old man and a little child were killed, the only victims of an air raid by German Taubes. His private graveyard, von Bernstorff, hoping that the Lusitania was buried forever, was busy with assurances of regret. His principal hope being that she might rest in peace. Let the decoration fit the crime. It was asserted, and has never been denied, by the German government, that the Kaiser decorated the commander of the U-boat which sank the Lusitania. Like sheep to the slaughter, Verdun had become a slaughterhouse. To save the tottering prestige of the Crown Prince Frederick Wilhelm, whole German battalions were sacrificed in vain efforts to break down the French defense. Von Tirpitz was said to have expressed deep sorrow for the women and children he had been compelled to kill, as well, perhaps, as for those whom he was to kill on the morrow. "Oh, woe is me," the pirate cried. "My duty's been full sore, and sorrow, like a rising tide, drowns all the joys of yore, and jocular as you may deem, this drowning children by the score. However droll the sport may seem, it gets to be a horrid bore. So let me sit, and weep my fill, safe on the dismal banks of Kiel. Weep for the babes who lie so still, only a pirate's heart can feel. Then pity the pirate, so old and gray, as he sharpen his knife and tears fall fast. He would cut your dear throat in a sort of a way. But his heart, oh, so tender, is breaking at last." On the sinking of a hospital ship, the Junker pirates, having filled the sea with little lost children, torpedoed a hospital ship and sent down into the deep a score of Red Cross nurses to keep them company. Pirates and privateers no longer exist. Von Yago. In the face of a sea campaign of frightfulness, von Yago came out with a statement that piracy no longer exists. But something just as good was made in Germany. "Well, Count, do you claim it?" In a safe of one von Igel were found documents of the most incriminating nature. Count von Bernstorff was given opportunity to claim them as official papers if he so desired. The Kaiser's colonial secretary for North America, Junker impudence in the German embassy at Washington had reached its highest point. Even Count von Bernstorff realized that he had gone the very limit with our State Department. "Please observe, Mr. Ambassador, that you are pretty close to the edge yourself." When the German ambassador protested against the deportation of his chief lieutenants for their activities in plots against our peace and safety, he was warned that his own position was none too secure. "From now on we will make no forward movement." Making a virtue, perhaps, of necessity, the German government announced, in February 1916, that from now on it would make no forward movement. Events since have proved how well it realized its true condition. Admiral of the Atlantic. In June 1916, Wilhelm II, peering out from behind Heligoland, where his ships had rusted for 2 years, declared himself Admiral of the Atlantic, assorted cargo for the return trip of the Deutschland. The Deutschland, a cargo submersible craft, sent over for reasons best known to the German Admiralty, was extremely mysterious as to her cargo for the return trip. Triumph of the Hohenzollerns at Verdun. It was stated in a cable from Amsterdam that, by the Kaiser's direct personal order, issued about 3 weeks after the first attack on Verdun, to the court painter, a great historical painting was to be made, called the Triumph of the Hohenzollerns. Accordingly, the painter, with costumes, horses, models, and a chorus of photographers and assistants, mobilized his forces on an eminence overlooking Verdun. Those disappointing German Americans. Junkerdom could never understand why all German-born American citizens, or American citizens of German blood, did not immediately rally to the flag of Germany against the forces fighting for the liberty of the world. Preparing a few more answers to our protests, Germany was ready to talk about restricting U-boat activity as long as we would listen to her. But the sound of riveting machines in her shipyards was her real answer. Is anybody being fooled by this? While von Bethmann-Hollweg was talking of Germany's desire for peace and a cessation of slaughter, Germany was making every preparation for renewal, more ruthless than ever, of undersea warfare, a Prussian offer of peace. While her soldiers were driving Belgian civilians into slavery in Germany, von Bethmann-Hollweg was issuing such beautiful sentiments as the following, conscious of their responsibility before God, before their own nations, and before humanity. No, this is not Eliza crossing on the ice. An American German, not a German American, said in an interview in December 1916 that Germany's peace proposals had broken the ice. Maybe somebody wants to buy a little suckling pig. Hey, everybody in the world had heard of the German peace proposals, supposed to have been sent out by the Kaiser, but nobody had been allowed to see them. Bringing the flag up to date, the Kaiser and von Tirpitz were much happier in announcing a new campaign of intensive frightfulness than when endorsing the hypocritical peace proposals of von Bethmann-Hollweg. A survival of the Dark Ages. The retreat of the German army in northeastern France will be remembered as one of the blackest pages in Junker history. It stirred the indignation of the whole world. Germany, blinded by the glitter of 50 years of militarism, the German peasant now finds himself the bearer of a crushing burden. His case is not helped by the diplomacy which guides him under their true flag. On February 1st, the German Admiralty, with the utmost deliberation, raised the black flag of piracy against the entire world, declaring that all vessels of whatever description would be sunk on sight if they approached European waters. Wrathful waiting. By the end of February 1917, the President and the people of the United States were in a state of indignation that could not much longer be controlled. They had exchanged watchful for wrathful waiting. The only answer, Kaiser, 1 day in the week you may go to Falmouth. Uncle Sam, 7 days in the week you may go to. Junker impudence finally overreached itself. When the United States was informed that it could send one ship striped like a zebra to Falmouth each week, American patience suddenly came to an end. I'm here, Mr. President, close behind you. The President addressed a request to Congress for power to arm merchant vessels for protection against German piracy. Another case of wiping hands on the American flag. 2 little children, born almost under the shadow of the Hall of Independence in Philadelphia, were murdered at sea in the new campaign of frightfulness for homeless Belgium. The feeling of America for devastated Belgium was shown in the action of the Rocky Mountain Club, which gave the $1 million collected for a clubhouse in New York to the homeless Belgians. Shame only American sailors, not a woman or child in the lot. An American merchant ship was sunk, carrying down a score of American sailors. Not a single child in the lot. The price of frightfulness seemed wasted. Something to remember after the war. Many things done by the Germans in the heat and frenzy of war will be forgiven, but in the days and years to come, the murder of the sick and wounded and the devoted women of the Red Cross on hospital ships will be beyond human forgiveness. The new recruit, Mr. Carranza, showed signs of having fallen under strong German influence. He seemed inclined to adopt the goose step at Tampico. It is to laugh. The tension in public feeling was suddenly relieved by the revelations of a plot in which Germany and Mexico were to offer a full partnership to Japan in return for an attack on our southwestern border. It caused a roar of laughter from Washington to Tokyo and back. We are now getting the enemy out of their trenches. German report. The Kaiser's plan for getting the boys out of the trenches in eastern France was almost as naive as Mr. Henry Ford's plan of 2 years ago, and much more effective. Papa, here comes the light that killed Uncle Nick. The fate of the Romanovs must have been most disturbing to the peace of mind of the Hohenzollern family. The torch of liberty arose like thunder across the seas. The Junker must go. England, France, Russia, Italy and the United States recognized that the Junker menace to the world must be thoroughly crushed before peace could ever return to the world. Come away. Our music is not for barbarians. Prussia at last realized that the United States could no longer be cajoled. Austria was therefore advised to give up all pretense of friendliness and come out into the open as a foe to America. The Pfiffelsteins, under orders from Wilhelmstrasse, the pacifists, were bending every endeavor to induce the American government to bow down in craven acquiescence to the restrictions of Berlin on ocean travel. The honeymoon is over. He gave me a black eye at Carnegie Hall. It was discovered that German money was paying a great part of the expenses of the pacifist party. The pacifists were willing to take the money, but objected to being found out. A good recruiting sergeant for Uncle Sam. A U-boat was reported at work off the port of New York. This proved of considerable value to the recruiting sergeants. Will it succeed? Germany set a trap beautifully baited with honeyed words for the Russian bear. It looked for a time as though the bear would be caught, still luring them on. Perhaps Prussia builded better than she knew when she carved out a heroic wooden figure to represent her hero, von Hindenburg. The von Hindenburg line was constantly nearing Berlin. Mobilized, Uncle Sam took command of one of the most powerful branches of his industrial army, the railroads. They swore allegiance to the flag. The way to do it. Admiral Fiske advocated going after the submarines with hydro-aeroplanes armed with torpedoes and guns. Congress was urged to provide a great fleet of the aerocraft. Rehearsing their swan song, the Hohenzollern family were beginning to realize that the day of divine right was nearing its end. They were gathering at the feet of old Fritz for their swan song. Hold fast, everybody. When the Russian loosened his hold on the Junker beast, a situation loomed up that called for all the resolution and resourcefulness of the remaining allies. This is their emblem. The United States Marine Corps, true to its traditions, was in the forefront of Uncle Sam's entry into the arena of the World's War. To France. When France presented the United States with the great Statue of Liberty, which stands at our gates, she little thought how powerful that symbol of her friendship would someday prove. By its shining light we now march to her aid. If you like your video, please subscribe so you can watch more from Tell Me a Story.